Thanks, Chris. It's an honor to be with you all this morning, and it's an even greater honor to have with us United States Congressman Drew Ferguson, who represents Georgia's 3rd Congressional District. Congressman, it's great to have you with us this morning. Let's go ahead and get things started. First question, what are the main objectives for this Congress of the House Republican Caucus?
I think most importantly, we want to get Americans back to work, start rebuilding this economy. We know particularly Georgians want to be employed. We've got to make sure that they've got the right incentives to take up the job openings that exist right now. But we've got to push that around the country as well. There are 8.1 million job openings as of today. And we've got a number of people that need to, that quite candidly, we need them back in the workforce. So getting our folks back to work is a priority. Again, doing things that make sense for our economy, protecting the things that have made our economy the strongest in the world pre-pandemic, making sure that we have the right regulatory environment, the right tax environment. And really, we know that a lot of families right now are worried about their safety. So we want to make sure that, that our communities are safe, making sure that there's adequate funding and training for our brave men and women in blue that protect us every single day. But most importantly, we have to stop the madness at the southern border. The human trafficking and the drug trafficking that's occurring because of the cartels, it's not just affecting the border. That's coming into to every single state. If you live in one of our 50 states, you now live in a border state. And, we have to make sure that, that we secure that border. We also have to make sure and be realistic about opening up our schools and our education system, not only fully opening back here in Georgia, but around the country as well. The damage that's been done to our youth by keeping them out of the classroom is, it's time to put that to an end and get our children back into school and make sure that our parents have a say in their children's education.
Well, Congressman, let's narrow the focus a little bit.
Sure.
Obviously, you guys have to take care of our entire country, our entire nation. What are the Georgia congressional delegation's priorities? What are y'all focused on as a group?
First of all, as it relates to Georgia, we are so fortunate in Georgia that our economy is doing so much better than most around the country. I think leaders in the state have done a remarkable job of guiding us through this pandemic, making sure that the Georgians could reopen in a smart and effective way where we didn't overwhelm our hospital systems. And I think the states, whether it's the state government or our citizens, I think we've done a good job of navigating this. So the Georgia delegation is always interested in working on real bipartisan infrastructure projects. We know the importance of that. We've seen what happens when you invest in infrastructure in the state of Georgia, whether it's our ports, our airports, our roads, the rail systems. But we also need to recognize as another important part that we've got to continue to focus on, and that's broadband infrastructure in our rural communities. There's not a single part of our state where, and particularly the district, when I travel, that we don't hear about the need for broadband. And the issues around healthcare and education and business startup, we've seen what happens when you don't have broadband during the pandemic. It's been a big change, and what we've seen is that we've seen our rural communities and our rural families fall further behind. So broadband infrastructure is going to continue to be something that's important, and that's something that I think all Georgians can agree on.
That's absolutely right. If we haven't learned anything before 2020, we've certainly learned over the course of 2020 that broadband internet access is an integral part of infrastructure in the 21st century. Well, speaking of
Michael, to that point with broadband, I think it's important to note the work that Georgia has done there already. I think that there are maybe 13 EMCs right now around the state that are beginning to provide broadband to two different parts of the state that have not had that access, and that was made possible by our governor, Brian Kemp, in the state legislature. So these things are happening. We just need to continue to focus on it. And if we're ever going to have real equality in Georgia between our rural areas and the suburban urban areas, it's got to be a part of the equation.
That's absolutely right. And of course, one of the challenges for that rural broadband infrastructure is funding. So that brings us to infrastructure. Back in 2016, both of the major party candidates running for president were competing with each other to see who could have the biggest infrastructure plan. And then for 4 years, it was infrastructure week, but we never actually saw an infrastructure bill. And now President Biden has introduced a plan. Still haven't seen the bill, but we have a plan for an over $2 trillion infrastructure bill. And of course, Republicans have released a counterproposal of priorities. What do you think? First of all, do you think Congress will pass a major infrastructure bill this year? And what do you think that final product will look like, if so? And how do those priorities that may end up in the final product potentially benefit Georgia?
First of all, we want to make sure that any infrastructure bill that is passed is both bipartisan and it is looking at a broad array of items that are related to traditional infrastructure. We don't think it's appropriate, however, to put non-infrastructure deals into an infrastructure bill. The mental gymnastics that I've seen some go through on this next spending bill are pretty amazing to justify the word infrastructure in their priorities. I will say this: if we get, I believe that there's a desire to put forth a meaningful bipartisan infrastructure bill that deals with our road systems, with our rails, our waterways, our ports, and of course, as we mentioned, broadband, and to invest and continue investing in our airports around the country. We've got to be mindful, though, that we do not have unlimited funds, and I'll say it again. If I think both parties would like to put forth a bipartisan bill, but it needs to be focused on real infrastructure and staying away from the things that really have no place in an infrastructure bill.
Yeah, it seems like over the last week, there's been some movement to actually try to separate the more traditional infrastructure categories out. Do you think that's what ends up happening, is those get separated out into a standalone bill and the other priorities have to stand on their own merits later?
I think that may be what happens here. You still have there's still some challenges even with that, with how to pay for this. I think we've got to be realistic and understand that that we are going to have to pay for this. We can't keep borrowing money. But again, I think the key here is do it in a smart way that has the least amount of impact, particularly on our middle class and lower income workers. What we've seen so far does not do that. So we want to make sure that that the Georgia families are protected. They're struggling right now with gas prices. We saw prior to the issues with the Colonial Pipeline, we were already feeling this, and that was a real tax on working families. So we've got to be mindful that when we do this, we got to be very careful about making sure that we don't hit the working people with a hidden tax, that because inflation is coming, fuel prices are up. We've got to make sure that that our working families stand a chance of getting ahead, and we're committed to that.
Absolutely. Of course, infrastructure is one of those categories of federal spending that actually results in economic activity and growth and a return on that investment. So balancing those two, I'm sure, is quite a challenge. Speaking of challenges, Congress is as partisan, as hyper-partisan as it's ever been. Nevertheless, do you think there are some opportunities or some policy categories where there are opportunities for the two sides to work together and come up with a proposal?
Yeah, so one of the most underreported things are a lot of the bipartisan bills that get through Congress right now. The members see one another now in person much more frequently. You see the relationships being built. I, for one, work very well with members on the other side of the aisle on reasonable pieces of legislation. I think the challenge comes is that when you make extreme moves, either to the very far fringes, either to the right or to the left, that's what makes it difficult to work in a bipartisan way. However, you can find those opportunities, and some of those that we've talked about, broadband. I've got members from the other side of the aisle that are that are very much interested in figuring out creative ways to get broadband into our rural areas, recognizing that our rural communities are behind with healthcare and education. So yes, you can find those opportunities, and you can build relationships across the aisle. And I think it's important that we continue to do that. Just to my south, I'll give you a perfect example. There's been I've been working with Representative Sanford Bishop on a new VA clinic there. A good example of Republican and Democrat working for the betterment of their districts. And so you can find these these rays of hope in there. The bottom line is we've got to keep things focused, though, on making sure that that Americans have, and particularly Georgians, have access to the jobs that they want. Make sure that they have decent, safe homes to come back to at the end of the day. Make sure that their kids are educated and they've got a say in the kids' education. And most Americans, and particularly Georgians, they just want to be left alone to be free to be who they want to be in this great country. So if we can talk about jobs, education, safety in the home, and personal freedom, those are areas that we should all be working towards.
Well, fortunately, our Georgia congressional delegation can continue to be the example for the rest of the country of that bipartisanship and working across the aisle towards common goals. Well, you touched on this earlier, Congressman. Georgia has been very, very blessed. I think we all knew that before the pandemic, but certainly over the course of the last year or so, Georgia's economy has not suffered the depths that some of the other states around the country have, and seems to be on the path to rebounding much quicker than other states. How do you feel like Georgia's economy will rebound as we continue to move out of the pandemic into the post-pandemic world?
Georgia is further ahead. I travel the country a lot right now, going to different states and different congressional districts. And what we're seeing is that Georgia is further ahead. The courage and wisdom of the governor and the state legislature to do the things that they did to reopen this state in a safe and sensible way are paying dividends right now, because Georgians have opportunities that our fellow Americans in other states don't have right now. So I applaud the leadership in the state for doing what it did. I think probably the greatest threat to the economic recovery right now are the disincentives for work that the federal government continues to push right now. It's undeniable in a state like Georgia, we need our fellow Georgians to come back to work. We need to make sure that that we are accessing their talents and their drive. Our economy needs that. And we need to make sure that we're, again, doing things to wind down these enhanced unemployment benefits that are keeping too many people on the sidelines. Restaurant after restaurant, manufacturer after manufacturer, hotel after hotel are all telling me the same thing. We cannot operate at full capacity. We have orders for it. We have the business for it. We don't have the workforce to deliver. That's a problem. We've got to get our fellow Georgians back to work. If we do that, Georgia's economy is going to continue to grow. And if we're smart about it, we can translate that economic growth into a healthier rural Georgia, which will make our entire state better. And so when I look at it, it's about getting Georgians back to work, making sure that the right incentives are there for them to go to work, and then translating Georgia's great economic success to every corner of our great state.
Congressman, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap it up?
I think it's really important with as we go through the next couple of years, as we're continue to recover from the pandemic, we keep an eye on what I think is the most important thing here, and that is job creation. I've lived in a community where we didn't have jobs, and I've seen what happens when the jobs come back, and it's pretty amazing. And so I think whether it's small business, whether it's one of our Fortune 500 companies, we need to be focused on doing the things that allow the business community to create jobs. There is nothing more important than having the dignity of work in a family, making sure that there's meaningful work in a good job. If we will stay focused on that and we will keep the main thing, which is keeping Georgians working and letting them build a future, a successful future, then our great state is going to continue to lead the nation in the world.
Well, I'm sure that that is music to the ears of the members of the Georgia Chamber of Commerce. Congressman, we thank you for being with us this morning. We thank you for what you're doing up in Washington, D.C. To represent Georgia's interest and Georgia families and Georgia businesses. Again, thank you for being with us. And now we're going to turn our focus to agriculture.